Hello class. Today we are looking at section 5.7, solving equations by factoring. Turn to page 346 and look at quadratic equations. It says a quadratic equation in one variable is an equation of the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. This is called quadratic form, where a, b, and c are real numbers and a does not equal 0. On the next page, it says this equation indicates that the product of two quantities is 0. However, if the product, we know product means multiplication, answer to a multiplication problem, of two quantities is 0, then at least one of those quantities must be 0. This fact is called the zero factor property. And the zero factor property says, suppose A and B represent two real numbers. And when you think about real numbers, think about numbers on a number line. We have integers, positive whole numbers, positive, we have negative whole numbers, 0, we have decimals, we have square roots in between the number line. If AB equals 0, then A equals 0 or B equals 0. So make sure you go back and read those two things on pages 346 and 347. But what I read is what we're about to do. So when we go over these examples, go back and reread those properties and that vocabulary to make sure you understand. When I say a quadratic equation, it's going to be something squared. So that definition talks about that. When I look at these problems, if I see something squared, we know it's quadratic. And if you go on to the next math class, you'll talk about different types of graphs when you get to your next class. Turn to page 351 and let's look at number 7. It says solve. What does solve mean? We know that solve means that we are to get x by itself. So for number 7, I have 2x minus 5 times 3x plus 6 equal 0. Look at the left-hand side of the equal. Is this in standard form? If it is in standard form, what is my degree? What is my leading coefficient? What is my constant? If you can look at the left-hand side of my equal and tell me those things, then you know it's in standard form. But if you can't tell me that, then it's not in standard form. So this is called factored form. When I see something times something else, that is in factored form. This is a good thing because when I'm solving equations and I'm going to have more than one answer, factored form is excellent. So if it's in factored form, we just take each parentheses and set it equal to 0. I have 2x minus 5 equals 0. And then 3x plus 6 equals 0. Now, that's the great thing about factored form is that I can take each parentheses or each part, set it equal to 0, and now we're going to solve. We're going to get x by itself. Remember your vocabulary terms: multiplicative inverse, which is taking the reciprocal, multiplying by the reciprocal, and additive inverse, which is writing the opposite. So think about those terms: multiplicative inverse and additive inverse. Very important terms. Right here, the additive inverse of minus 5 is plus 5. I'm left with 2x equal 5 because 5 minus 5 equals 0. So they go away. Now I'm going to take the multiplicative inverse and I'm going to divide both sides by 2. So my first answer, I have x equal 5 over 2. Right here, we're going to keep it simple. The opposite of plus 6 is minus 6. I'm left with 3x equal negative 6. Then I say 3 times, so to undo times, we divide 3 on both sides. So x equal negative 2. Okay, so my answers are negative 2 and 5 over 2. Now, on the next one, I'm going to tell you about the degree, and then we'll tie it into our answer. Let's go to number 17. It says solve. X squared plus 7x equal 0. Now, on 17, is this in standard form or factored form? Well, I know that my leading coefficient is 1. My degree is 2. I don't have a constant this time. So this is in standard form. I want to write it in factored form. So to write it in factored form, I need to factor. My GCF is x. I'm going up and down, so we subtract the exponents. 2 minus 1 is x. Plus, I factored out a x, so 7 is left over, equal 0. Now we're going to take each part and set equal to 0. X equals 0. X is already solved, so I'm done there. X plus 7 equals 0. I'm going to subtract 7 on both sides. Opposites equal 0, so x equals negative 7. My two answers are negative 7 and 0. How many answers did I get for x? I'm going to write it as a solution set. I got 2 answers for x, negative 7 and 0. This order does not matter, but I do tell students to get in the habit of writing the smaller number and then the larger number, because it's going to help you in your next math class. So just get in the habit of writing the smaller number, then the larger number after that. So put it in numerical order. But if you wrote 0, negative 7, it is still correct. This is a solution set with my braces, and both of these numbers represent x. But what do you notice? I have 2 answers, and my degree is 2. So right here, my degree tells me how many answers I'm going to have, whether they're real or they're not real. But we're going to deal with real numbers just for this class. But the degree tells me how many answers I will have for x, so that's very important. So on the last one, number 7, if you were to FOIL out the left-hand side, you would have saw that 2x times 3x was 6x squared, and you would have had a degree of 2. Going on, look at number 19. X squared minus 2x plus 1 equal 0. I see a trinomial with a leading coefficient of positive 1. So I'm going to do a trial and error factor. I know x times x is x to the second. I know 1 times 1 is 1. And if the last sign is addition, I write the first sign twice. This is a perfect trinomial because the parentheses are identical. Now, if I look at this, I have x minus 1 equals 0, and then x minus 1 equals 0 again. I still have 2 answers. They're just the same answer. So x equal, to move minus 1 to the right, I got to add 1. And then let's go through the process here so you can see it. So my answer is 1. So in the back of the book, they write 1, 1. That's how the back of the book writes it. If you were to write a solution set, just put 1 down 1 time, and that's good enough. But you do know it's 2 answers there, 1 and 1. Look at 31. What type of polynomial am I looking at? And how do I write that polynomial in factor form? So 31, we have 9y squared minus 4 equal 0. Right here, this is a binomial. Leading coefficient is 9. Degree is 2. My constant is negative 4. It is a perfect square. That means I can take the square root of both terms. The square root of 9y squared is 3y. The square root of 4 is 2. And when we do a perfect square, they're going to look like conjugates, so my signs will be different. We're going to set each parentheses equal to 0. When it's in factored form and you don't have to factor anything else out, you can stop. So let's get y by itself. Subtract 2 on both sides. I have 3y equals negative 2. Divide by 3. So we have y equals negative 2/3. So that's my first answer. So we have our first answer. Over here, we're going to add 2 on both sides of my equation. The 2's are going to cancel to 0. We have 3y equal 2. Divide both sides by 3. So y equals 2/3. So my two answers are negative 2/3 and positive 2/3, and you can write it as a solution set. Okay, look at number 43. Two x squared minus 5x equal negative 2. Right here, what do you notice that's different about 43 from the others that we have done? Well, one thing I've noticed that's different is that it does not equal 0, it equals negative 2. So when we are factoring and we're solving equations by factoring, I want to set everything equal to 0. I'm going to rewrite this as 2x squared minus 5x. When I move minus 2 from the right to the left of the equal, it becomes positive 2. And nothing is left over to the right, so we're going to put 0 there because nothing is there. Now right here, you can do I have a trinomial and my leading coefficient is not positive 1. You can do trial and error method. You can do the master product method. The master product method, I'm going to take my leading coefficient times my constant, which is 4. And I'm trying to figure out what will multiply to give me 4 and add to give me 5. And that's what you need to say to yourself as you're studying. What will multiply to give me 4 and A-N-D add to give me 5? 2 times 2, okay, that's 4, but it doesn't add to give me 5. 4 times 1 does add to give me 5. And then my sign is negative, so negative 4 times negative 1 is positive 4. And then when I add those together, I get negative 5. So we are doing the master product method. So it's so important that you understand that method. So we're going to rewrite it and say 2x squared. And then I'm going to apply my two factors I found. Negative 4x minus 1x plus 2x equals 0. And just check your math very quickly. Negative 4x minus 1x is negative 5x still. So I did not change my problem. I see 4 terms. I'm going to do factor by grouping. I'm going to put the first 2 together. My GCF here is 2x. What is left over? 2 minus 1 is x. Minus 2 goes into 4 2 times. And my last 2 terms, they have nothing in common except minus 1. So when I factor out minus 1, I'm left with x, a negative times a negative gives me positive 2. Then set it equal to 0. Check it again. Do my parentheses match? Yes, that lets me know I did it correctly. After that, you're going to factor your GCF again. So I have x minus 2. All this falls under grouping, but this is the procedure when you're doing factor by grouping. Now, take each parentheses, because it's in factored form now. It's in factor form when I have something times something. Or it could be something times something times something. Everything has to be multiplied together to be in factor form. This was not in factor form yet because I see a big old minus sign in between. So it wasn't multiplied together yet. But when it gets like this, I know it's in factor form. We have x minus 2 equals 0. And then 2x minus 1 equals 0. Okay, so you can finish the math on this. So when I finish the math, I have x equal 2. And then you're going to add 1 and divide 2. So when I add 1 and divide 2, I should get 1/2. And if I want to write this as a solution set, I'm going to say 1/2, comma 2. And make sure you put it in braces, not parentheses, not brackets, none of that, just braces when you're talking about a solution set. Okay, look at number 47. We have 4x squared equal 81. Now, if you know how to use the square root property, go ahead and use that method. But if you don't know how to use square root property, just do it the way we've been doing the rest of the problems. Set everything equal to 0. So I'm going to set everything equal to 0. And I see a binomial. I can take the square root of the first and the last term. So I'm going to, I see a perfect square. The square root of 4 is 2. Square root of x to the second is x. Square root of 81 is 9. And we talked about this difference of two squares. So we have talked about this already in this chapter. So if you have forgotten it, just go back and look at your notes and refresh on that. When I do, it says difference. I need to see a minus sign. 2, I need to see two terms. Squares, I need to be able to take the square root of both parts. That's the difference of two squares. 2x plus 9 equals 0. And then 2x minus 9 equals 0. Solve for x. So we're going to say 2x equal. I want to subtract 9. And then divide 2. So x is negative 9 over 2. I want to add 9. So 2x equals add 9. Divide both sides by 2. 2's cancel to 1. So x is 9 over 2. So my two solutions is negative 9 over 2 and 9 over 2. And again, you can write that in your solution set. And that is my answer. Again, my degree is 2, so I have two answers for x. Let's try another one. Let's try number 57. We have x to the third plus 3x squared plus 2x equal 0. Well, right here, I noticed something they have in common. They have an x. So I want to first factor out my greatest common factor, which is x. I'm going up, down, up, down, up, down. So we are dividing. When dividing, you subtract the exponents. 3 minus 1 is x squared plus, bring down your 3, bring down your x. 2 minus 1 is 1 plus, bring down the 2, 1 minus 1, no x, equal 0. But I still see a trinomial. So on here, I probably can factor again. You might and you might can't, but just you want to try to see if it can factor. I'm going to go ahead and say x, 2 parentheses, equals 0. X times x, I'm doing trial and error method. What will multiply to give me 2 and add to give me 3? 2 times 1 is 2. Positive 2 plus 1 is positive 3. And I was able to do it very easily because the leading coefficient was positive 1. When the leading coefficient is positive 1, do the trial and error. Just plug it in and see if everything fits in the right place. And you can always check yourself by foiling this out or doing a box method to see if it matches the original trinomial. What is my degree? My degree is 3. That means I'm going to have 3 answers for x this time. My first answer is x equal 0. So I took my x here and said equals 0. My next parentheses, I'm going to say x plus 2 equal 0. So x equal minus 2. My last one, x plus 1 equals 0. We're going to subtract 1 on both sides. So my 3 solutions are negative 2, negative 1, 0. And again, get in the habit of putting your answer in numerical order. But if you do not, it's still correct. But just try to get in the habit of doing it in numerical order. Very important. Let's try 63. We have x to the third plus 7x squared equal x squared minus 9x. Again, we are solving. We want to write it in factor form. We want everything to equal 0. So let's do that first. I have x to the third plus 7x squared. When I move x squared over to the left, it becomes minus x squared. When I move minus 9x to the left, it becomes positive 9x. And I set it equal to 0. Now, we are going to, let's combine like terms. I'll get tempted and think about factor by grouping because I see 1, 2, 3, 4 terms. But go ahead and just combine your like terms first. We have x to the third plus 7 minus 1 is 6x squared plus 9x equal 0. Now, I see that I have a GCF, greatest common factor, is x. We are subtracting the exponents. 3 minus 1 is x squared plus 6, 2 minus 1 is x plus 9, 1 minus 1, no x, equal 0. Now, we're going to have 3 solutions. X, we can do an easy trial and error because my leading coefficient is positive 1. What multiplies to give me 9 and adds to give me 6? 3 times 3 is 9. Positive 3 plus 3 is 6. And this is a perfect trinomial. So x equals 0. X plus 3 equal 0 twice. So x equal negative 3 and x equal negative 3 again. So if I write this as a solution set, my answer is negative 3 and 0. And that is my answer. Okay, so this is a review of section 5.7. Very important that you know how to solve equations. So if you have forgotten that, you may want to do some additional research and note taking on how to solve for x, because that's very important to know that rule. We have talked about so many factoring strategies in this chapter, so it is so important that you review those sections and make sure you're looking at your notes to help you understand each method that we have talked about. On your emphasis sheet, it tells us to look at section 5.6 and 7.4. But it is just a review of everything that I have shown you on the online notes. So please use those 2 additional sections to review a little more. And the main thing I'm seeing that students are having a hard time with factoring is identifying which method to use. So it is so important that as you are preparing for your tests, exams, that you know what strategy you are supposed to use when you begin to factor. That is the main thing I see students are struggling with. So please review that. And if you need any other help or you have any concerns, please let me know.